Hello, everyone, and welcome to another lecture. And this time, this is a topic that's very close to my heart because I practice this all along in my private practice. And this time, we will be talking about PGT or your um, pharmacogenetic testing, which actually give rise to the concept also of personalized medicine. So this is very um, interesting topic that I have adopted in my practice. In fact, I've been doing this PGT testing for almost about 6, 7 years now, and it has really helped me some of my decision making as to medication management and pharmacologic management to my patient. So I call this, so this is basically not in a lecture mode, but rather more of a presentation mode. And I focus a little bit on the science of genetic, but not heavily there. I'm not a geneticist by all means, but I am uh, a practitioner who embrace the science of genetic and incorporate the practice into my clinical setting. So that's why I called it as PGT guided personalized medicine in clinical practice. And I added a whole twist of it could be the hope of for the future. So that's the context of this discussion. I will touch a little bit of the understanding of genetic as a science, but not heavily. Again, by all means, I'm not a geneticist, but I'm a nurse practitioner who embraced the practice. And that's the context of the discussion here. Um, in fact, I will give you some example of how I navigate through certain patients with the use of the pharmacogenetic testing result. So I'll be showing you some genetic testing result. My goal here is basically to communicate with you how it may impact, your clinical practice if you incorporate this science and the testing. So therefore, I would say that objective here is that the learner will be able to express understanding about basic concept of pharmacogenetics and genomics and how is it being applied in clinical practice setting. So that is the whole context of the discussion. It's not to make you a nurse scientist out of the blue, but somebody who actually utilizes the science and the evidence base behind it into your practice, that somehow it makes a difference in how you make decision making as you make decisions as to what type of medication you're going to use, guided by your pharmacogenetic testing. So some specific objective, the learner here will be able to express understanding of the basic concept of genomics and pharmacogenomics. So basic concept, demonstrate the ability to interpret your pharmacogenetic result, and perhaps verbalize and identify the importance and the significance of pharmacogenetics in clinical practice. If you notice, I simplify the objective here into the how this science makes a difference in your practice. Thus, I call it, it could be the hope for the future. So let me start you with asking, what is the leading cause of death related to hospital intervention? So it's very, very, very specific. What do you think is the leading cause of death related to hospital intervention? So basically, it's very, very predictable. Perhaps that question is leading because of our course is pharmacology. So it brings us now to the understanding that the answer basically is that medication error or adverse reaction of medication or something to do with medication management. So about 1 in every 15 hospital admission is due to adverse drug reaction here is the leading cause here. One, in fact, the leading cause, I would say, is medication management related. About 1 in every 15 hospital admission will have some adverse drug reaction. And in the US alone, about 106,000 patients die and 2.2 million are injured each year by adverse drug reaction of a prescribed drugs. That's very impactful. And when you become a nurse practitioner, a provider, a prescriber, if they say too, you don't allow yourself to be part of the statistics. Okay, 2.2 million are injured each year by adverse reaction of prescribed medication. So therefore, it helps us think that individuality in drug response is inherited, genetically determined, and variability defined in pharmacogenetics. So each individual, I would say, has variation in response to drugs. And that variation in response to drug is somehow inherited. It's not something that you choose. You choose to be responsive to this drug, but it's inherited. It's in your genes. It's genetically determined. And variability here is actually what defines pharmacogenetics. So why are we interested in pharmacogenetics? Because the variability of each individual's reaction to medication actually help, the science of pharmacogenetics help us understand, or perhaps some lead and guidance that we can go along rather than just pure trial and error. It makes a difference to think about, about the medication. We talk about, for the previous topics we talk about how a medication affects this part of the brain, how the medication works. But basically, we haven't talked about how your body responds to the medication. We only look at how the medication is expected to work. We never consider how the body also interacts with this medication and how the body processes the medication, that it may yield variation of results. And that's the beauty of your pharmacogenetics. So it brings us to this question even and statement. Why certain drugs do not work as well as expected, where as in other patient, they cause a toxic effect even at the lower dose? Or why is there variety of reaction to the same medication in various patients? Reaction of one is not the same as the reaction of the other. We might have the same medication, the same dose, the same manufacturer, but two different patients who receive similar medication might have variation in reaction. Did you ever think that the difference between these two individuals who's receiving the same medication and the same dose, probably the same time, maybe the difference in their genetic profile? That's the other side of the coin. And that's what we're trying to navigate, how to narrow that gap and how to decrease the differences and perhaps decrease and narrow the gap of trial and error before we zero in as to what would be the bests that the body would process and achieve, of course, achieve the outcome we would like to achieve. Could genetic plays a role? So very important. Definitely yes, genetic plays a role. So let's look at and understand genetic first. Genetic is a branch of biology concerned with the study of genes, genetic variation, and heredity of the organism. There you are. That's why we are very, very interested with genetics, because we acknowledge that some of our traits, when we say traits, are characteristic, the way we look or perhaps the way we respond. And if trait means the way we look, the height, the color of our hair, the color of our skin, the color of our eyes, even some of our behavior, could it also be that in a cellular level, this heredity predetermines how we react to chemical we put into our body, such as drugs? So genetics actually gives us that understanding that the gene predicts or helps us to predict certain traits of an individual. That the gene, that although it helps predict certain traits of individual, it can also vary from one individual to the other. So your biological science research influence a lot, such as genetic variation, disease susceptibility. But in the realm of pharmacology, we are also very interested how this genetic, as a branch of biomedical sciences, would actually help us to understand drug response to each individual, to each of your patient. So now it started now to inculcate into your mind that drug response may be different from individual to individual. There is no such thing as a cookie cutter that all depressed patient will respond to SSRI. There may vary, and it's not only in SSRI that all patient responds to Prozac specifically. One may not, the other may, the other has no effect at all, but the other also may have a lot of side effect. That's the variation in drug response we like to navigate, and we would like to narrow that gap as we practice in clinical setting. So let's understand certain certain terminology here. So when we say pharmacogenetics, as it will be defined, when we say pharmacogenetics, they are individual variation in drug metabolism and distribution. Okay? Individual variation in drug metabolism and distribution. How this drug is being metabolized and all distributed and utilized in the body, which is when we say pharmacogenetics, look at the genetics or the gene, which is most influenced by a single gene. And then later on, we name that gene. Okay, we'll give an example of the name of gene. So pharmacogenetics is how that gene try to utilize and metabolize and distribute this chemical called drug. But when we say pharmacogenomics, it's the knowledge of the gene characteristic or the pharmacogenetic plus individual variation in drug targets and disease mechanism. So if we know that this medication goes to the liver and is processed by the single gene, and how that gene would behave and would like to process it normally, we are looking at pharmacogenetics. But when we use that gene in the liver, in the specific drug, plus what could be a variation of the individual that may affect the drug result or the therapeutic effect or the outcome in a disease process, then we are looking at pharmacogenomics. So they may likely involve multiple genes or drug-to-drug interaction. Because like, for example, a Prozac that goes to the gene 2D6 is the name in the liver, it's processed there. How that gene behave is pharmacogenetics. But when you're taking another medication, like a blood pressure medication or warfarin, that other medication may affect how that normal reaction of that gene 2D6, because now there is drug-to-drug interaction, then the response may be different. So we're looking at pharmacogenomics, but some books interchange them, pharmacogenetics and pharmacogenomics. What we like to look at is pharmacogenetics is related to the behavior of the gene as it relates to that certain chemical or drug, but pharmacogenomics is that characteristic of the gene plus other factor and variation that plays along that may change also the response of drug. So let's look at also and review to understand pharmacogenetics. Let's also look at your pharmacokinetics. That's basic in your pharmacology, pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So in pharmacokinetics has some genetic influences also. This is how, when we say kinetics movement, this is how drug in the gene is being absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and I would like to italize that metabolism. Metabolism then is the process of breaking down a substance so that you could utilize its therapeutic effect and achieve the outcome. And then whatever is not needed, because medication or chemical is a foreign body, the body has to dump it out and remove it to your system. That's the whole process of metabolism so that it will be excreted. So, therefore, understanding that pharmacokinetics influences absorption, distribution, breakdown, and metabolize it so it be excrete, it can also influence, understanding can also influence dose requirement and or control on adverse effect. So what if the body utilizes Prozac so fast and dump it out? Well, if you look at your drug study guide or your Hippocrates, it says start with 20 milligram. But could it be that in considering the genetic influence, especially understanding the pharmacokinetics and how it is metabolized, what if your body, that gene, is so slow to metabolize that molecule of Prozac? Do you think 20 is a good dose? If it's low, probably 20, another 20 tomorrow, another 20 the following day, and still the body is not breaking it down because it's very slow metabolizing in its metabolism, considering the pharmacokinetics. Probably 20 will be too much. So why not make the dose requirement probably lower, right? Or what if, considering pharmacokinetics in that gene and that metabolism rate is so fast, and then you look at your Hippocrates or medication guide and it says start with 20. That 20 is being breaking down really fast and flush out, right? Will it do its job of being antidepressant and relieve an outcome of having depressive symptoms? Probably not. That is pharmacokinetics in action. So even though the book tells you start with 20, hey, could this person benefit if you increase it a little so it influences drug requirements? Why not make it 30 or perhaps 20 twice a day? So that while it's flushed out, there's another dose coming up. Or could it be that you got to decide, because there is variation here, I use a different medication. Prozac might not be the best because I have to play around and the body don't know how to process Prozac as expected. That's a reflection there. So that's how it influences requirements or adverse reaction. Because that patient, perhaps who's slow metabolizing, you give 20 milligram of Prozac, another 20 tomorrow, the adverse reaction is that they're going to be very sleepy, very groggy, and then they start gaining weight. So now they're not getting the therapeutic effect fast enough, but they are compiling the molecule because your body is not metabolizing it so fast that you have all the adverse reaction. So probably Prozac is not a good idea. I'm just giving you that example. I hope you get the whole thought. And then considering the pharmacodynamic or the genetic characteristic and considering pharmacodynamic influences, it can influence drug targets. What are we trying to achieve? Because looking at your pharmacodynamic, we're looking at the gene's receptor, the transporter, the neurotransmitter, intercellular communication and signaling and pathways, or even enzymes and metabolic pathway, because there are drugs that needs to be metabolized with a need of certain enzyme to simplify it before the body can utilize it to create the adverse to create the therapeutic response. So it also, your pharmacodynamics, your knowledge about receptor, transport, intracellular communication signaling, enzymes following certain metabolic pathway, overall is affected by the knowledge of your pharmacodynamics, understanding the genetic. That's why it can also influence drug efficacy. I will go back to this concept in a bit when I try to give an example, and remind yourself this is when I'll be talking about drug efficacy, and I'll give you an example of how even a simple folic acid, that synthetic folate normally that you get from green leafy vegetable, but they're synthetically made in the lab and they're calling folic acid, not everyone will benefit out from the folic acid because there are certain enzymes in the body, considering the pharmacodynamic genetic influence, that may not be there. And that folic acid cannot be simplified to its simpler form called L-metafolate, and which that L-metafolate is a raw material to produce your serotonin. I'm going to go back there. I'm just setting it up to give you an example of how enzyme metabolic pathway can influence drug efficacy. So in the example with that I gave you, what if you don't have that enzyme? That's pharmacodynamics, and you don't have that enzyme to simplify folic acid to a form called L-metafolate. Do you think that folic acid is effective and help you produce the much needed serotonin? Could it be the reason why you have problems with simplification and metabolism of folic acid? That could be the reason why your serotonin is low and now you're feeling depressed. But when you give folic acid, since you don't have an enzyme to process it, could it be rendered useless? That's when you have an influence of drug efficacy. That folic acid, after all, is not as effective when you don't have the enzyme, considering the pharmacodynamics of the gene, you don't have that enzyme to simplify it to L-metafolate. So could it be that what you will suggest to your patient is to use L-metafolate rather than folic acid, a simpler form of folic acid? Just like your carbs, it needs your enzyme in your salivary gland or saliva to convert it to glucose, and it's the glucose that the body can utilize as a source of energy. I will go back to that. So looking at your pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics, they work hand in hand in order to make that drug effective. In the pharmacodynamic side, variation changes on how the drug affects the body, and in the pharmacokinetics, it's the variation changes on how the body affects the drug. So it's both has to work together in order to make this drug achieve its outcome, and the rest will be timely excreted because, after all, they are chemicals exogenous to the body. That's just how I show that diagram. So due to genetic variation, we set it up that individual to individual might have genetic variation. Some patients vary greatly in activity of certain isoenzyme. In this case, I put CYP450, for example. As a result, what will be the response of a gene? So a gene, I'll discuss later on also the gene. A gene may behave differently. We all might have CYP450, you know. So drugs that goes there, has to be metabolized by the body, by that gene, and the behavior and characteristic of that gene. So as a result, a gene, CYP450, in each individual may react differently from individual to individual due to genetic variation. Some will have ultra metabolizer, meaning they're fast. They will break it down really fast and remove and excrete the chemical. Some are also in the opposite, which is poor metabolizer. It takes them a long time to metabolize a drug molecule. So it compounds, it builds up. So in the middle, you may have extensive metabolizer or intermediate metabolizer. These are the two that's within the norm rate. They may have a very slight difference, but we would like to see that these are at least what's closest to achieving an outcome, that the body is able to utilize it if they are extensive metabolizer or intermediate metabolizer. And that's where we could say that, hey, the body here knows how to process timely to get the result and to remove the byproducts. So then our biggest concern is when they're ultra rapid or poor metabolizer. These are all the different characteristics of the reaction of a certain gene, like for example the CYP450, due to variation, genetic variation. Let's look at another graph here. So if you look at this graph, drug response, I would like to see, this is drug level, how it increased in your body, and these are the days of taking the medication. You know, these are the days. So you have, that's when we say 3 to 4 weeks to achieve your steady state. You remember that in your pharmacology basic, your steady state, where the drug now can make a difference. However, because of certain drug response, it may even, if, although you have the number of days, drug levels may also vary, and the result may also vary due to the reaction of the genes. So we have A here as a poor metabolizer. Take example, you take day 1, nothing happens. Then you have day 2, day 3. So now the drug level goes up. But if you have an A response, that certain gene, 2D6 perhaps, is a poor metabolizer. So you notice as early as day 2, the level of the drug is already high. That as it goes up, it goes high, high, high so early. While that of an D, which is ultra rapid metabolizer, so let me complete. So as the days progress, taking that type of medication to a patient who is poor metabolizer, responds to that certain genes, you notice that the level is high and it easily goes to toxic dose. Makes sense? But the opposite here, the D, which is ultra rapid metabolizer, this is now the response of that certain gene, probably example 2D6, is so fast that it devours it. As the day progresses, the level of the drug is still very low, and it's not even the effective dose because it's fastly metabolized. So as a result, those A, who's poor metabolizer, there is absent or greatly reduced ability to clear or activate the drugs. While that in B, the ultra-rapid metabolizer, even if you're taking it more days, it's still not able to achieve the drug level of effective dose. It's still underdosing it because it's being flushed of the body. So it's greatly increased activity, accelerating clearance and activation. So that's why you'll never get the effect. So those are the two extreme. But if you look at the B and C, B is the intermediate metabolizer, where there is normal and some reduced activity in certain gene, but in B, it's still able to build up over time enough that it's not in the toxic, but it's within the effective dose. But that also in C, also called extensive metabolizer, which is what we really call the norm. So both are also norm. Instead that there's some reduced activity in B, you notice B and C is within that bracket. So we would like to be looking at and understanding that certain gene that process certain medication, may it be in the liver or any parts of the body that is capable of metabolizing certain medication, are within intermediate metabolizer or extensive metabolizer, because this is the characteristic or the trait of the gene that will be able to get us to a steady state where we could achieve the therapeutic level, not going to the toxic or nor underdosing us. I hope it makes sense to you. So other factors we would like to understand first, also knowing pharmacogenetic. What are some factors affecting pharmacogenetic in clinical practice? So now we have that understanding of different behavior of the gene, that it's different from individual to individual. Now we look at our practice. Remember what that's one of our goals is how we incorporated the practice so that we try to acknowledge it too. There are factors affecting diffusion or allowing practitioners to utilize pharmacogenetic in their clinical practice. One, availability of diagnostic tests. Well, in the state of Nevada, we do have company that process, however, we don't have the lab that process it. Everything we do here, we have to send to California, San Diego, and some other outstate. There is no lab here within our state that process, but it's just a matter of mailing, about 2 to 3 days turn around, and then they come back. So availability of the diagnostic test. Two, providers' ability to use the tests. Well, some provider are not so equipped to use this test. They don't have much great understanding yet because it's not part of the curriculum in many of the programs. It just so happened that this is one of my passion and I really would like to share this with you. So that's why I incorporate it so that you will have the beginning understanding and the appreciation of utilizing pharmacogenetics in your practice. So that's an advantage, I think. But some provider don't have that ability, either accessing the test or also their understanding and appreciation because training usually does not include. And then also another challenge here is the evidence-based guideline. Although it is approved by FDA, there is no strong guidelines. Pharmacogenetics, however, was been approved by FDA since the 1950s. However, it still needs a lot of research to create evidence-based guidelines. They are practice guidelines, but not necessarily so strong like your understanding of SSRI and what's the guidelines to it, you know. And then because of some limitations, although there are research and there are a lot of research now, it's just not so vast like any other field because it's still a developing, you know, a field of science. Treatment protocol is not as strong and it's not as available. But there are, don't get me wrong. I remember when I started pharmacogenetics way back in 2015 in my practice to look at depression or to look at antidepressants, I only have 3 genes that is understood in how it behaves or the test is available to discover how these genes behave. Now there's I think about 8 or 10 different genes now of various medication that is now fully understood in genetics. So it has changed. So those patients that I have, although genes will never change in their behavior, there are patients that I have in 2014 that I have to retest, not because it changes what is known, but there are more genes that is being understood better and test is available to know and discover how to test their behavior as part of the pharmacogenetics. So furthermore, there are also barriers to adaptation of pharmacogenetics. Why some provider doesn't readily adapt, you know? You may meet some of providers later on that may probably say, oh, I know it's there. I believe that there. In fact, study shows that a lot of providers believe it matters, but only very few practice. Why? One, because of insufficient training of providers. Knowledge, continuing education, availability of training, cost perhaps of training, or availability to involve themselves, you know, might not be there. So insufficient training of providers may cause them not to adopt pharmacogenetics. Also is perceived lack of knowledge. It's like, oh, it's not part of mine and I'm so old to do this, you know, so I'm just go on with my trial and error way of treating, which is still what is widely used. Some are, as I've said, lack of access to tests, and that's example. There are few companies, lab genetic company that is doing it here in Las Vegas, although we don't have laboratories, so we have to rep has to go and then you have to mail it some out of state. And then also in the side of the patient, there are also privacy issues. And privacy issues, especially, I got to tell you, you know, you got to treat paranoia. If you want to do this to your paranoid schizophrenic, they might think that you are producing mini-me's. you know, privacy issues too. Some people also think, now you're taking my saliva, it's actually just a saliva test. What if you're selling my genetic profile? So those a lot of issues also that may also deter people to submit into pharmacogenetics. So furthermore, into pharmacogenetics, we understand that understanding pharmacogenetics and pharmacogenomics, we talk about genetic variation. Also, it helps us identify some disease susceptibility, and especially what we're focused in pharmacology is drug responses. May it be responses due to single medication to a single gene, or due to the change of behavior of a single gene as there are drug to drug interaction. It may change the drug response. So this is what I'm saying you in the statistics. 97.6% of provider in the study conducted about pharmacogenetics understanding and utilization, 97.6% providers surveyed agreed that genetic influence affects or genetic influence drug response. That's big. They all agree that it can influence drug response. So that's given. But what's sad is that only 10.3 felt adequately informed about pharmacogenetic testing. Only 10.3. So in this class, I'm trying to introduce to you. Hopefully, it opens up the door. It will not be everything, but at least it opens interest and understanding in utilizing this science, acknowledged as can influence drug response, but only few felt they are introduced. And of that 10.3%, only of that 10.3% who adequately felt they are informed of the pharmacogenetics, only 12.9% out of that 10.3 use and order pharmacogenetics in the past 6 months of their practice or with the research being done. That's very, very little. Out of 10%, only who felt like they have some information, only 12.9% actually do it in clinical practice. So therefore, there is a need to educate prescribers. And that's why I was thinking I have to include it as part of your special population consideration in your pharmacology management in mental health issues. Again, as I've said, we talk about depression, we talk about anxiety, we talk about mood disorder, we talk about schizophrenia or psychosis, how to deal with drugs, but we all focus on how the drug is being studied. We never consider the other side of the coin of how could be individual differences plays the ultimate role of drug efficacy as a result, because we need to consider what we give and how the receiver reacts to it, right? So that's the whole concept. So lack of value in policy and practice change also affects pharmacogenetic testing in the bedside. Okay, some people don't acknowledge it, and there's no policy, strong policy or standard of practice to allow every individual to make sure you do this as a part of your decision making. We're not there yet. So let's continue into that build-up. I want you to ponder on this. No two patients are the same. That's the beauty of acknowledging that although we know what Prozac is, we know what Celexa is, we know what Risperidone is, how it works, how it affects, how it controls, but ultimate result is how well the body reacts to it. How well the genes process it, metabolize it. No two patients are the same. So pharmacogenomics and pharmacogenetics defy as a science that's there to defy the concept of one drug fits all. After all, Prozac, who's a wonder drug in the 80s, is not for everyone. Everyone's not for Adderall if you don't have attention. Everyone will not respond definitely the same like Risperidone when you're so angry and agitated. So I want you to consider that. That's the concept why the word came in as the word personalized medicine comes in. It comes from this statement that no two patients are the same. So we hope that our approach as we use available medication is to acknowledge also that variation is present and it's not a cookie cutter after all. It's not a cookie cutter that one drug fits all. So let's look at furthermore and understand more. Okay? So I want you to have a little understanding of the genome representation. And then slowly I'll bring you as to this genetic or genes, how it is represented to an actual gene where medication goes to. Okay, so let's start. One is that I would like to understand that when we say chromosome, okay, when we say chromosome, I would say chromosome is the big box because chromosome is where the protein upon which your DNA is tied up. I would say if you stretch a DNA, if you stretch that DNA, it would be so long that it does not fit into the nucleus of your cell. So therefore, there has to be a means to shorten that about 5 to 6 feet if you stretch out that DNA, your blueprint, in order to fit into the nucleus of your cell, which is very, very small room. So think about chromosome as a pool, okay? Think about the chromosome as a pool. It is made of protein. I'm trying to simplify it. So think of a chromosome as a pool where you could wind around your thread. So if you stretch that thread, it's so long, right? But in order to fit it, you have to twirl it around or wind it around in a pool so where it should attach. That's your pool, is your protein, which is your chromosome. The DNA is what you turn around. Now it fits into the nucleus, the center of your cell. In that stretch of DNA that is twirled around or wrapped around the chromosome, there are sections called genes. So the genes are that section of your DNA that is capable of exerting certain trait that you inherit from both of your offspring. So this is now where I'll bring you in this circle. This circle now would represent your chromosome, and wrapped around are the genes. And the genes, if you look at that representation of the DNA, this is part of the DNA, and that section here is the gene is in pair, right? It's in pair. You have one pair and one pair. That's why in a helix, that's the thread, and then there are pair along the way. This is now the chromosome in pair. I'm putting it around your chromosome. So the genes with a pair. I want you to understand that each chromosome, a section of that DNA, chromosome, each gene, a section of that DNA has certain parts also. And that certain characteristic is what we actually inherit from our parents. So that's why there's two, one from each parent. And then there are placement of the certain characteristic, and they are in pair. You get it from your mom, where my cursor is, and then you get it from your dad, where my cursor is. And this triangle in that gene is predictable. I'm just making it up for your trait. Where my trait? So what is your trait? That's characteristic. Your characteristic. So let's make it simple. If this is the gene, and they are placed side by side between the chromosome that you get from your mom and the chromosome you get from your dad, they're side by side. So this is the triangle that would determine your height. That's whether you're tall or you are short, that's the trait you get. Each trait has certain characteristic of being dominant or being recessive. Now, by the way, before I move on, the pair of certain genes that predicts a certain trait is called alleles. So although this is one part of that gene, there are two subparts inside that is predicting your trait, and I get it, for example, for your height, how tall you are, the pair is called allele. So when you say alleles, two alleles per autosomal genes is called your homozygote. They're the same. But where is this homozygous alleles? That means two alleles are the same. Remember I said two alleles can be the same or can be different. In this case, if they're the same alleles, both capital T, and where I put the capital T here means you are tall guy and your mom is a tall woman, and you have this triangle both of two the same alleles that are dominant, they are called homozygous, then both homozygous dominant trait represented by TT, your offspring is very tall. Well, the opposite would happen. Still in homozygous, what if they are small letter t? And I put here small letter t becomes the recessive, means the weaker gene for a trait. What happened is, if they're both small t, they can be both homozygous but recessive. They are the weak part, so probably the offspring or the child will be short, right? But there's genetic variation. What if in that gene, that autosomal gene, and in the triangle, the allele, the pair that determines mom and dad based on your height, one is you get a tall one and a recessive small one, letter T. It's always that the dominant gene or trait would mask the recessive gene. Then probably you have a person that is tall but not so tall, right? They can be tall but not so tall, like your homozygous dominant, that is double capital T. Then, although this strong dominant gene for trait, which is tall capital T, might mask the small letter recessive gene short, so they may be taller but not so tall. That's why your probably sibling may have the homozygous dominant and they're very tall. The other one is, okay, not so tall, because then it's being paired with also some recessiveness, but it would mask this. I hope you understand how variation works. It's the same as to, I don't know, I'm just making it up that, the triangle becomes your height. Probably this diamond becomes the color of your eyes. And then this little octagon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hexagon. This hexagon yellow might be probably your color of your hair. So it's the same. And all are the imprint of your DNA wrapped around in your chromosomes, and the pair is what we call as your allele. But each allele, as they're determining a trait, might have a dominant and a recessive, and then that's why the offspring may vary. That's why individual may also vary. I hope it makes sense, and I hope it simplifies it. So let's look at what if this allele, this pair, at first we call about the trait, about the height. What if this is the allele that actually determines the trait of that gene when it comes to how fast they can metabolize? So I'm giving you a big picture of color of the eye, color of the skin, color of the or the height differences. But in a cellular level, this chromosome also predicts what you get from your mom and your dad, and they pair together in an allele, but they could also determine the trait of that gene as it comes to how that gene behaves as they metabolize certain chemicals, right? It's the same story. It's the same story as your height. Can be variation, can be dominant, can be homozygous dominant and they are fast metabolizing, or they can be homozygous recessive and weaker and they are slow metabolizing. Now you have your ultra rapid metabolizer and you have your poor metabolizer, and anything in between with your heterozygous can be your intermediate, norm metabolizer. So I'm gonna replace that story of height to the gene, and that gene focuses on the behavior of the gene, on how well they metabolize substances. I hope it makes a difference. And this will be the next slide. So let's look at gene representation. I'm gonna get this gene and this allele separate now. So now the triangle becomes that trait determinant of CYP2D6. Now, where could we get the CYP2D6? I want you to pause a little bit. If you have, and I would like you to open and pause me, if you may, because I want you to work on along the way, so how would you know it? If you use Epocrates, go to your Epocrates app. Pause, go to your Epocrates app. Do me a favor, when you open your Epocrates app, I'm looking at mine so that you will also have some time for yourself. Or any, if not Epocrates app, you have whatever, your book, perhaps for your drug study. But type in Prozac. Let's type in Prozac or enter Prozac. So now you enter Prozac. As you look at Prozac, scroll down and click Pharmacology. As I've said, as you click Prozac, scroll down and click on Pharmacology. Guess what? When you open Pharmacology tab, you would see number 1 there is metabolism. Who ever look at this? No one. I do. I do. In certain drugs, that I'm not familiar with. So, lowering Prozac, you have a way to navigate and look at metabolism. There you go. If you read metabolism, I read it for you. It says liver. So therefore, it's Prozac, and its simpler form is called fluoxetine. Generic. I'm sorry. Its generic is called fluoxetine. Is metabolized in the liver primarily by your 2D6. It says 2D6 primary. It's in your CYP450, primarily in your 2D6. There you go. After all, your drug study identifies genes. So this is now the genes called 2D6. It's the primary determinant and it's the primary genes in the liver, located in the liver, that can metabolize Prozac. It's called 2D6 primary. Right? So now let's look at 2D6. What if your 2D6, the asterisk here, identifies that your allele, the pair of allele, has both an asterisk, which happens to be, I'll call it, the dominant trait. So what happens? If the dominant trait becomes the speed, the trait of the speed of metabolizing Prozac in this gene called 2D6, then therefore this person who has 2 asterisks in both allele can be ultra rapid metabolizer. That makes sense? Versus the opposite one here, this is still the gene, the 2D6, and you give Prozac where Prozac goes and be metabolized, but there is no asterisk. So there must be the recessive rather than the dominant with that asterisk. So this must be the recessive. And the speed trait here, the speed is the trait that we're looking. So therefore, they metabolize Prozac in 2D6 very slow. Or your 2D6 is slow to metabolize. And then, bear with me. If you go back to the first page where Prozac is, and you click adult, indication and dosing, it says here, major depressive disorder, and start 20 milligrams. So now your pharmacology, your book, your knowledge, what we study, tells us and recommend us based on their generalized research that Prozac is best to be taken starting at 20 milligram. That's the research, right? But are we individualizing patient here? We're not. And if we look at that 20 milligrams, and this is our patient, with the allele has 2 asterisks, meaning dominant, and that looking at the trait of dominance here means the speed of metabolism, this is an ultra-rapid metabolizer. What would happen to your 20 milligram? It would not work. If you remember that graph I'm telling you, even though you take it for a long time, it's still not able to reach the therapeutic level because your gene behaves in a trait that it's ultra-rapid metabolizer. That's the context. In the opposite end here, what if that individual who's taking Prozac 20 milligrams and they have the recessive gene from both parents, which is, we're looking at this triangle representing the speed of metabolism of the 2D6 as it interacts with Prozac, then that means that 20 milligrams builds up, and easily as the days run over time, you're going into a very high level, probably higher than what you need, and then side effects would show. I hope you get the gist. And anything in between now is what we would like an extensive metabolizer in here. Then probably this is where in the graph that we could look at that earlier, that they will be able to achieve the therapeutic level. That makes sense? The same thing, do your example here with the gene now is representing here is another example. I'll name it as CYP2D19, which is where Celexa would go. Okay, so put yourself an exercise, open your Hippocrates, look at Celexa, where it's going, and what gene will it metabolize. What if that person doesn't have that dominant, so they become recessive, mostly, so they're slow to metabolize, versus the opposite here where you have 2 and anything in between, which is what we'd like to look at. I hope you understand that genome representation as it relates to how you utilize your Hippocrates to know and understand what gene is going to. But later on, I'll show you the result of the test, which makes it easier for you to look at, not necessarily reviewing all this concept I'm sharing with you. But it's good to understand, right? But when you have that understanding and you look at the result, you could say, oh my God, it's so easy. So this is another representation how genetic can affect medication blood level. So a person who have ultra rapid metabolizer, this could be the person in a certain gene and a certain trait we're looking at, in a sense of metabolism, that they are probably having the dominant trait and speed up the metabolism, and they become ultra rapid metabolizer in the result of your PGT testing. As I've said, they break down medication rapidly and may not get enough medication at the normal dose. So you need to increase that dose. So if you look at the whole body here, the medication is just only up to here. In the opposite, for the poor metabolizer, where they may have, in the poor metabolizer, they have the recessive gene, and the ultra rapid, they have the dominant gene. I'm sorry, I'm correcting that if I confuse you. Ultra rapid, they might have the recessive, they might have the dominant gene, and we're looking at the trait of speed of metabolism of that gene, then they may create ultra rapid metabolizer, breaking down of medication rapidly and may not get enough medication in a normal dose. In the opposite, for the poor metabolizer, where they have the recessive gene, the weaker gene, both from mom and dad, and we're looking at that trait in the allele that predicts their metabolism speed, they may be very poor metabolizing. The breakdown of medication is very slow, and they may experience side effect even in a normal dose because it builds up a lot. And anything in between is what we like to achieve, because we like to achieve normalcy. Extensive, which is normal, you have enough in the body but not too much to overcome you. Or in the intermediate metabolizer, they break down medication a little bit slow but may have too much medication at a normal dose also, so a little bit higher, but it's then within still the therapeutic level. So this is what we like to achieve. I hope that representation helps you out looking at how medication is built up and is excreted in the body and where we would like them to be, looking at the behavior or your trait of your genes metabolism. This is another picture. So if you're having this type of medication, and when you consider your genetic profile, so this is the alleles, the pair of certain trait predictor, then you will help. So people who are rapid metabolizer, perhaps, if you give this medication, for people who have rapid metabolizer, you may probably want to increase the medication, higher dose. For people who are poor metabolizer, you may probably cut that medication. So if the recommendation is 20, if they're poor metabolizer, you want to give 10. If they are ultra rapid metabolizer, then you may probably give twice a day, 3 times a day, And that's how you would like to dose your patient. So let's now put it into practice. So this is an example. One of the laboratory I used to is Millennium PGT, and I use different other laboratory as the time goes by. So I'm showing you the results. So this is coming from the Millennium Laboratory PGT result. I'm just putting a little background of the name, patient depression. So the main symptoms is, as I'm treating this patient of depression, after my assessment, after my evaluation, the patient is diagnosed with depression. So now I'm in the crossroad as to what medication should I give this patient, okay? What medication should I give this patient? So we know that the gene is being tested now. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 now. I started at 7, but right now there's 10 more. I started in 2014. There's only 3 for depression profile of genes. So we know that 2D6 is where Prozac goes primarily. So it helps me decide if I have to use Prozac. I'm looking at the gene CYP2D6 and what's the predictive phenotype. The predictive phenotype is basically your predictive trait. The predictive phenotype is your predictive trait of the genes as determined by the pair of allele that you get from the chromosome, both from your mother and father. In this result of the test, the test comes in now. The test result comes in now as poor metabolizer. Oh, so poor metabolizer. So should I give Prozac at 20? Or should I, if I have to give Prozac, should I start with 10? Because they're poor metabolizer and I don't want them to be having side effects, right? Or if I use Prozac, could I have other alternative? Oh, I saw here extensive normal metabolizer, and this is the CYP2C19. Remember that CYP2 219, let's go back. Oh, CYP219 is Celexa. Oh, instead of going to Prozac where they're poor metabolizer of Prozac and I have to adjust it by cutting it in half, why not just use an extensive normal metabolizer of CYP2C19 and I rather give them Celexa, right? But the reality in practice, then you give Celexa, another generic. But if it comes now to a generic and brand name, and it seems like the generic you have a variation, probably poor metabolizer or ultra rapid metabolizer, and you don't want it because it's a variation, it needs a lot of adjustment, it's not sure that the medication is working, your other choice, the patient will have normal or extensive metabolizer, but it's a brand name, sometimes you are forced to use the generic Prozac. And then you said, oh my God, I have to use generic because the patient's insurance mandate a step therapy. So if I really have to use Prozac, then I have to use Prozac, consider the phenotype or the trait, which is poor metabolizer, then I have to start with 10. And then after 4 to 6 weeks, evaluate, the patient complains it's not helping, it's not working, now I have data to support, and then I'll send prior authorization request and a step therapy saying we have failure of treatment. That's why I'm no longer using Prozac as I tried and required with therapy. You have to pay for this brand name because this patient is a normal metabolizer of that. Looking at the genetic factor. Does that make sense? If you look at also furthermore, it says here, I will show you another nice result of another company to compare. But in this case, current medication summary. So they will look at also, because before you take the test, the swab test, 5 swab in each cheek, then put it in a reagent, mail it to the laboratory, it would also ask, what are your current medication? And then when you look at the current medication, considering pharmacodynamics, remember we talk about pharmacodynamics? In the phenotype, we're talking about pharmacokinetics, how that single gene behaves, but they can also look at pharmacodynamics to consider your pharmacogenomics, right? On how drug-to-drug interaction, because that normal metabolizer, probably with another medication at hand, will create a different reaction to that gene, and then they become poor metabolizer or ultra-rapid metabolizer. Then they also look at and get the list of medication. So now it says if you are taking Paxil with this patient, with a drug and drug interaction, this might be poor metabolizer and you may probably need, patient may be at risk for side effect because they're poor metabolizer. That means side effects or medication buildup and adjustment may be needed. And what's your adjustment here? You probably would lower the dose because they're poor metabolizer of 2D6. So that's how you look at the result. I hope it helps. So here another thing, and there is a summary that you also read. Remember that 2D6 that we said poor metabolizer? It says patient is expected to have increased plasma level of 2D6 substrate. That's your Prozac, such as then carvedilol, amitriptyline, haloperidol, tamoxifen, codeine. So now it gives you that prediction that these are the medication that goes to 2D6. And patient may be at risk for side effects of paroxetine. And this is now considering what are the medication that the patient may have side effects because of drug-to-drug interaction, considering your pharmacodynamics. Prozac and hydrocodone. Isn't it nice? And then you have predictability here to go by and make your decision. That's where my point is. This is another kind of very fancy result, and I enjoy this company, and this company is called GeneSight. I've been a speaker from them for genetic testing. My audience were a medical provider, both NPs and MDs, and I really have fun discussing this and teaching, and perhaps, you know, giving more information if they don't have a pharmacogenetics, and that's my passion. Anyway, so the result here comes in this, and it's very easy to look at. They categorize antidepressants, so you would probably notice not only antidepressant, they will have mood stabilizer, you have your stimulants, and you have your antipsychotics. So they come in there, and that comes in handy. Then the chart will actually show you already green, yellow, and red, that even the patient would know. After you do the testing, they will now come up with your result and interpretation, and based on your pharmacogenetics, which is the reaction of that single gene to certain medication and the behavior of that single gene, or pharmacogenomics, that's the pharmacogenetic plus other variable factor, drug-to-drug interaction, they come up now with a result. They summarize it. You don't have to analyze it. What's good? So the green here means go, meaning use as directed. If we have to look at Prozac that says Prozac starts at 20, this is the medication that you start based on what's the recommendation in your drug handbook or your Hippocrates. So in this case, it shows that this medication, this patient, in the realm of antidepressant, it has this Pristiq, Fetsima, and Vibrant. The bad part here is that all this medication are brand name. So this patient is really high end. The patient only respond to a brand name medication, which is sometimes very challenging to your insurance. But if green is go, you could use this. Yellow means, hey, you can use yellow, but there are some consideration, like caution. Use it with caution, use it with modification, use it with monitoring. And it's good because they put you, I'll show you in the next page, they put you a guide here what to do. This number here is a statement below number 1, what it means, number 2, what it means, number 4, number 3, what it means. So, but this medication can have the in the between of their gene reaction. They could be some caution, there can be some consideration. There might be poor metabolizer or rapid metabolizer, but not necessarily ultra rapid metabolizer. So trazodone, Effexor, Prozac is here. So this patient may not, or they could use Prozac, but when you use Prozac, you have to alter something, you have to monitor something, you have to look at side effects and therapeutic effect. Unlike in the green that says it's a go, patient will be able to benefit out from it. But again, in medical field, nothing is written in stone 100%. That is just predictable of what's known to the medication and what we understood of how the gene behaves. And then it comes up with a recommendation. Don't take it as 100% all the time. But we narrow, as I've said, we narrow the gap. Okay, so then you have more of the moderate, and then of course if yellow means caution, use it with caution, use it with monitoring with some alteration on this guide. Red means stop. As much as possible, do not consider this because there are greater risk than therapeutic effect. Again, I would not say it's 100% no, but there is more reason for us to be cautious. If not, don't use it. Use something that's within the green definitely, or some minor modification in yellow, but if possible, there's significant drug-to-drug interaction that you might not get majority of the therapeutic intent and result. That helps without. And he has a lot, and the same thing. There is 1 to 6 guideline what to do. I will bring you to the next page where it shows the clinical consideration. And I may flip from one slide to another. There you go. Remember all this number that you see it here? I blur it out. Then you could see. So if in first it says, let's take Prozac because we build a Prozac. Prozac in yellow, what you need to do, and it has a code of 1 and 4. When you look up in the bottom, it says 1. 0 may be too high. Lower dose is required. Why is it too high? Because it's a poor metabolizer. So you need to have dose will be lower. So instead of 20, you start with 10. And it says 4. Genotype may impact drug mechanism of action and result in reduced efficacy. So that's the caution. Either reduce the dose, and in fact, it may even have reduced efficacy using Prozac. That's the caution. Isn't it beautiful? Because you already have a guide. Um, Lexapro or Celexa perhaps, and it says 3 and 4. Let's look at 3 and 4 as a caution for this patient if he takes Celexa. 3, difficult to predict dose adjustment due to conflicting variation in metabolism. It's still unknown in between. And then they have 4, which is, it says 4, genotype may impact reduce efficacy. So there are some guide of what's the worry. If you go to the significant gene-to-gene interaction, let's look at, for example, Wellbutrin, or let's have the 3. Cymbalta. Why is Cymbalta in red? Because there's more than 2, caution. 1, 6, and 8. So let's look at 1. Of course, maybe 2, serum level may be too high, lower dose, you need to adjust it. That's 1. 6 and 8. 6, use of this drug may increase risk of side effect. And 8, FDA level identify a potential gene-drug interaction for this medication. Isn't that nice? You have now the rationale why you don't choose this versus this. Then we narrow the gap of trial and error. We become more scientific. Then we consider the patient gene. We consider the variation. In a sense, we actually consider your patient's uniqueness, your patient's personalized medicine approach. That's when we have that. Remember back again when we were talking about folic acid? This is the time I'm going to go back there. So this is MTFHR. And remember when we were talking about pharmacodynamics, and it says including other factor that may affect variation, and one which is enzyme. So they are now able to predict that or check it out. So what happened here is that they can test how your gene called MTFHR here, behaves. Your gene MTFHR release an enzyme called MTFHR, which is actually equivalent to your, if I have to simplify it, again, I go back to carbohydrates. You eat bread or rice. You mix it up with your saliva and the enzymes in the saliva, and the enzymes and saliva breaks it down, simplify it to glucose so that it can be absorbed and utilized by the cell as glucose, not as a carb, as a simplified carb called glucose by virtue of your enzyme in the saliva, and then utilize as a source of energy. This is the same setup. You take folic acid from your tablets you buy probably in Costco called folic acid, or you probably eat a lot of green leafy vegetable, and the natural form of folic acid is called folate. So you get that folate. However, your body don't know how to utilize folic acid or folate. It needs to be simplified. It needs to be simplified in a way that your body knows how to utilize and use it for therapeutic reason. In order to get there, you need to simplify folic acid or folate with the presence of enzyme, just like in the saliva, with the presence of enzyme, and that enzyme is released by the gene called MTFHR. And that gene called MTFHR has an allele that predicts its behavior, its trait. So now you may have an MTFHR, that an allele with dominance that is very fast, or you have an MTFHR in the gene of MTFHR with an allele that is recessive, and the speed of metabolism is slow. This is now the result. The result is the MTFHR gene has reduced activity. There is a homozygous for the T allele at C677T with polymorphism that it reproduce a reduced activity. So now you have the word homozygous, so they may have the same allele that can be your recessive. In their changes and variation, that's what we mean by polymorphism. in the MTHFR gene. As a result, they are reduced activity. So if you have a significantly reduced activity of your MTHFR gene, my question is, if your MTHFR gene has this polymorphism of being a reduced activity as a significant variation, do you think this gene will be able to produce its reduced activity, will be able to secrete the enzyme MTHFR, also called, to transform folic acid to L-metafolate? L-metafolate now is the end product simplified folic acid acted upon by your enzyme MTHFR from the gene also called MTHFR. But with a reduced activity or significantly reduced activity as indicated in this result, do you think there is gene to convert it? Of course none. Your folic acid remains folic acid or folate in the natural form. There will be no L-metafolate to be used. So in a way, there's no glucose to be used as a source of energy. But what's significant here? Why are we fussing about here in mental health? It's because, let me tell you, L-metafolate as a product of your MTHFR enzyme from the MTHFR gene, granting they have normal activity, we produce L-metafolate out from folic acid, and it's the L-metafolate that is also used by your neurons to produce your serotonin. Remember the process of reuptake, where the serotonin that stays in the synapse is being reabsorbed back to the neuron, and it's broken down by your MOA, monoamine, your monoamines, and it's breaking down to produce a new serotonin. Then once it's broken down by the MOA, that's why we want to inhibit it, right? With the inhibitor, but I'm talking about the MOA. When it's breaking down by the MOA, then with the presence of L-metafolate, the simplified form of your folic acid, as a result of a normal activity of MTHFR, will be able to produce serotonin for you to transmit again and get into the receptor to create that excitement and motivation, right? So that's how it works too, that not all patients actually benefits out from antidepressants. Some of them has some problems in metabolism, probably converting folic acid to L-metafolate, because we don't know yet. We never tested what's their what's their MTHFR activity is. Now with the help of pharmacogenetics, we know that if they are having significant reduced folic acid, the question is, should we give them folic acid? The answer is no, because there's no enzyme to convert it. But what's good is that there is now L-metafolate that's synthetic. We bypass that MTHFR enzyme and we give them L-methylfolate as a simpler form, just like glucose is given, D5, D3, D50, just like as glucose is now available to give it straight to the blood so that it can be utilized. There is now available in the market called L-metafolate. Look at it, and the brand name is called Deplin. So now I give Deplin for people who have reduced activity, and hopefully it takes a long time, 9 months to a year before they build up their own level higher enough to make a difference, but it becomes a food supplement. That's why they call Deplin as medical supplement. Although lately I've seen already a lot in what's this? There's a lot of L-methylfolate in Amazon. I just don't trust. But FDA approved Deplin as L-methylfolate. What it is, it's a prescription with a dose of 7.5 milligram to 15. And an adult who has a reduced activity in MTHFR to replace L-methylfolate needs at least 7.5 to 15 milligrams. What's available in the market in a food store is an over-the-counter L-metafolate that is 1 milligram. So that means you need to take 15 tablets. It's a whole meal for you to create a dose, because the 15 milligram dose is a prescription food supplement. It needs to be prescribed because of a higher dose. That's just the break and think. But I don't know what's in Amazon. I've seen that. I have some patients who say, oh, Deplin is so expensive, Dr. Tan. But I've seen this as Amazon. I said, I cannot stand what's in Amazon. If it has the same name, take the risk. But what's FDA approved, if L-metafolate with a brand name called Deplin. So that's how I deal with it. Let me tell you a really quick story. I know, I think it's significant, but I would like to give you this a little story, especially with MTFHR. I have a patient who has been all his time, and he was a therapist too at the same time, and we shared the same office, and he became my patient. All his time, he was taking Prozac and Wellbutrin most of his adult life, and this person is now in his mid-60s. You know, and he still have some depression, a little bit improvement there and there, situation, weather, you know, time of the year, sometimes go up and down with depression. So he maintains Prozac and Wellbutrin. Anyway, that's the background. Until the advent of the genetic testing, he says, Jay, I've heard you've been doing this. Can I have just genetic testing? So we did genetic testing. One of the results significant is that he is significantly reduced folic acid conversion, reduced activity of the FMRs. So I said, you know what? This is it. I went into the discussion and the explanation how folic acid needs to be converted by the use enzyme MTFHR, but his MTFHR gene is not effectively working to produce the enzyme. That's why with the result, I would say there's the reduce of L-metafolate, which is needed for the depression. And that's probably why he is supplementing it with Prozac to prevent the reuptake of the Prozac, so that there's always serotonin available by the SSRI or the selective serotonin inhibition action of Prozac, so that there's always endogenous serotonin available and not being destroyed, right, in the process of reuptake. So I said, let's try Deplin. So he tried Deplin. I have a lot of supply. I've been supplying him. And, you know, 1 month, 2 months, I told him, you know, it takes a long time. It may take about 9 months to a year. So into the year and a half of taking it, he says, Jay, I feel good throughout this time now. I mean, I'm more excited. His problem is taking Prozac. It's that the side effects too, you know. He gained weights over time. Sometimes he's sleepy and still a little bit depressed. That's why I complemented it with Wellbutrin. That's how the management was. And then also the sexual side effect. Until I complemented it with Deplin. Again, as 1 year and a half, he says, I feel good. Let's try to reduce the medication. So slowly I reduced one after the other. And over time, in a period of 6 months, I was able to eliminate Prozac and I was able to eliminate Wellbutrin. Now there's less side effects, less weight gain, more alert, more motivated, and now without antidepressant, only the supplement of Deplin. It's just, I was just so lucky, again, that this person is, I didn't know that he was a columnist in Review Journal, The Sun and the Review Journal. And one day he wrote extensively about what we do, what I did to him, and how this new science helped him, and how all his life he was feeling always certain level of depression and anxiety, and now he doesn't take the medication, he's only taking the food supplement. He published it, and since then I have a lot of call from different radio station, TV station, and talk about this. So that's one of the success I could share with you, and how pharmacogenetics really have helped. I hope it gives you some insight. So it's the same now, okay? So we're looking at this. You have this is a profile for your ADHD medication, Vyvanse, Focalin. Unfortunately, this patient doesn't have anything in the green, so we have to focus on the blue, on the yellow, and then not on the red. So this is an example of a patient that Strattera probably is not a good work for them. But if you use Adderall, serum level will be too high, lower the dose. So it tells you don't start with higher dose, 30 milligrams, 20 milligrams, start with 5 or 10. And then if you want to use Ritalin, it's 4. Genotype suggests to reduce response of this medication. So probably Ritalin is not a good choice. You go for Adderall. So this becomes more objective rather than trial and error, as I've said. It makes you feel more strong, grounded. And then you have opioids, the same manner, things. Okay, and then you also have a profile for your antipsychotics. So I hope you get the gist and how to make decision and how you probably would consider genetic testing in your practice somehow. Okay. So pharmacogenetics help patients identifying the right patient with the right medication at the right dose at the right time. So that's what is more in that's what that take in, considering pharmacogenetic in your practice. It helps patient using the right medication, deciding into the right dose in just the right time that they need help. This may be also thought of as a tailoring of medication treatment to individual characteristics, such as the thought of personalized medicine. So a comprehensive prospective way to preventing, diagnosing, treating, and monitoring disease in a way to achieve optimal individual health care decision. And in pharmacogenetics, as a mental or as a health practitioner, it really narrows the gap of trial and error and helps you more objective. I just say narrow the gap, not completely bridging it, but narrowing the gap, and prevents you from guessing to become more objective in your decision making. Always remember that most medical treatments, such as medication, have been designed for average patient. What you see in Prozac, 20 milligrams, is designed for average patient. As a result of this, there is this concept of one-size-fits-all approach. But treatment can be very successful for some patients and not the other with the use of your pharmacogenetics or your primary or your personalized medicine. This is what the White House during the Obama administration, where they start proliferating and funding more pharmacogenetics research and practice. And I quoted that because that was a turning point where there's really more money invested on research to create standardized of practice and protocol that we long to have. Hopefully you'll consider it your practice. Okay. Again, that was a time when Obama seeks 2.5 million for personalized medicine, to be pursued at that time. So looking at pharmacogenetics, how did it start? It started with oncology. There are about 32 genes and drugs identified already because that's where it started in pharmacogenetics is oncology. You need to be very fast to identify what medication works for the patient. There's no time for trial and error in cancer proliferation. So that's why they started it there. And then I would say the next one here is pain medication. And then the third area is psychiatry and neurology. There are about 32 drugs known now that has genetic profile. And now they're starting to build up also 10 drugs for cardiovascular. Who knows? And it's more discovering too. Okay? So that's just a background. So let me end you up with a story. A very, very story. And I end up my presentation here. I have a patient that I seen, and she has been from different providers. But anyway, and she probably heard one of my interview. Yes, I think, yeah, she heard about one of my interview in the radio or in TV about pharmacogenetics. Remember that guy who wrote about me? And then a lot of, review journal printed more, and a radio station, TV station. I've been talking about pharmacogenetics and been advocating for it. But anyway, so she heard one of that, and she's been to a different provider, and she came to me. Oh, well, her presentation is that she's kind of indifferent, she's kind of cautious. I don't blame her. But on our interactions, she says, I've been through a lot of medication. What's good is that this patient remembers. When I said a medication, she says, I remember that. And she's very specific. I'm in this dose. This is what happened to me. But at the end, she says, nothing works. Nothing works for me, you know? And she is angry. Another problem she has is that a little background of this patient is she is kind of well-off family. She has peculiar behavior. Anger is one, agitation is another, some suspiciousness, you know, and in a way there are some telltale sign of schizoaffective symptoms because they're well off. The family brought her a condo in downtown, high rise in downtown, and it's nice now in downtown area. There's a lot of high rise. They bought a unit so that they will not just be interacting every day because it creates problems and chaos. They have her, but she's very functional. She has a master's degree also, but there she lives. Another part of her narration during my assessment is that I hate where I live. My family brought me this. It's a nice place, but I hate it. So I said, well, tell me more about what makes you hate the place. You know, your family brought you with that. They're supporting you. But what makes it hate you? I hate it. That place, people are partying. I cannot sleep. They're banging. They're yelling. They're dancing. I cannot sleep. 2, 3 a.m. I cannot sleep. They're so loud. I hate that place. That's one of her presentation, along with the other symptoms. Down to diagnosis, there are certain symptoms of schizoaffective. So then, in our discussion, she always identified no medication works. She's very definite. So I went into antipsychotic, of course, and then do this, do that, nothing. So I said, let's do pharmacogenetic testing. And she agreed because that's how she knows and came out. So she agrees. So I would not do it if she doesn't agree because of paranoia. But it seems like paranoia about creating mini-me is not her focus. So she agreed. We did pharmacogenetic testing. Then 3-4 days turnaround, results come in. She came back. She was right. Most of the medications she tried and mentioned, it's either mostly in the yellow and mostly in the red, except for one. One in the green is Abilify. At that time, Abilify was brand name, not generic now. It was at that time brand name. Remember, I've been practicing this since 2014. So it was brand name. So I said, well, this is what happened, the result. You are very right. Most of the medication you tried, it's either in yellow or mostly in red. That's why you have interaction. She says, see, I'm right, and da-da-da-da-da, and she asserts herself again. I said, but what's good is that there is one in green called Abilify. Have you tried that? And I said, so I haven't. So I said, well, let's try it. I do have a lot of samples. Let me give it to you. So I gave it to her. I said, let's see you in a month. She came back after a month. And then when she came back, she looks light in mood, a little bit smiling, well organized, and she stops and sits down. And she says, that medication helps me. I'm more calmer. I said, well, that's good. So that's benefit of it. And then she says, unknowingly throw out a statement. And I gotta tell you, I love my place. So I said, okay, now you love your place. Last time we met, you said you hated it. I said, like, yeah, I love it now. I said, well, what makes the change? I said, and she said, I think all my neighbors left the building and move out. So now they're quiet and nobody's there and I could sleep. Then it dawned on me, oh my God, what she was telling me, that they're all quiet partying, was part of her hallucination. That now that she's on the medication, an antipsychotic, it took away that hallucination. And not only that, she was hallucinating and not sleeping. That's why she says they're so noisy and I cannot sleep. Now, with the antipsychotic medication indicated in the genetic profile, she sleeps and she thinks all of them. Can you imagine all of your neighbor left and you are at peace? Well, she still believes that because don't have any she don't have any proof to go door to door. But it tells me that I believe her based on her symptoms, but because of the antipsychotic, it decreases the symptoms. So I was very happy. I continued with her. Now my next problem was I giving her some sample, but then when I start prescribing it, insurance denies it. I continue to give her some samples, insurance deny it because it's brand name. I try to do twice of prior authorization, they still deny it until I submitted the result of PGT testing. What else do you want me to do? All your step therapy are all in red. This is what it makes. I have documented 6 months of giving them, supporting this patient with a sample medication, and it works, decrease the symptoms, and ultimately they cover it. So it was a nice turnaround. But not only that, so then a year after, she came and was tearful. I said, oh my God, I think I need to. That was just my impression. But she was a little bit tearful, and she says, well, Dr. Tan, let me talk to you. My mom is like you. She is a nurse, or she was a nurse practitioner, and in mental health. And we share a lot of symptoms. She also angry, mood swings, hear voices, so on. We share a lot of symptoms. She is on a lot of medication, so there you could see hereditary attributes of similarities, right? I said, so what happened to your mom? And she stops the discussion. And then more tears run and look at me. And she's gone. So I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Your mom is no longer with us. And she says, yes. And she committed suicide. And in her suicide note, she wrote, nothing works. Like me, I think nothing works. I wish she lives on the day when genetic testing is available. What you did to me and how you helped me out with genetic testing could have saved my mom's life, which is very true. It gives me a really, really deep sense of pondering that, yeah, that's the impact of individual. And then move forward 2 years after, we still maintain the Abilify. 2 years after, she came very excited. She came very excited and said, Dr. Tan, I have a good news to you. And I said, oh, by the way, what I never told you is that after that month, not only she's living alone, after 6 months, she says, you know what, Dr. Tan, I have a good news. And what was the good news? She says, I'm now applying for a job. And her first job is 99 cents. She was a sales executive at 99 cents. After 6 months in 99 cents. So this is a person who was just from family support, now trying to work back in the community. And then after 6 months, she says, I really don't feel, I have a master's degree. I felt like 99 cents is appropriate for me. So she moves to Ross. So she stayed in Ross for about a year. And then now she says she is working in MGM, in executive in MGM. So that's really a big leap of change, So somebody who's not working and now is working in a corporate office. But that was not the happiness that she was telling me 2 years after. Then she told me, I have good news. And I said, what's the good news? And she says, let's put it this way, Dr. Tan. While I was going from doctors to doctors, trying medications, having all my symptoms, one of my goal is to write a book. And it was been 10 years since I'm stopping, and 10 years have passed, I never completed. Last week, I'm telling you, it's not only complete, but I was able to submit it for publication. And last week is that it was accepted by Amazon. And I have ISBN, and Amazon has that. Well, of course, knowing what she told me about the story of banging, not sleeping, partying, I became doubtful if this is another symptoms of some delusion. But I didn't argue. I said, oh, well, that's good. Well, if you would kind enough, I would like to look at that book and perhaps purchase it, because now I know about you, but let me look at in Amazon. And she opened Amazon, she rolled it, and she showed me the picture, the ISBN, the price, and she says, look at that in the cover. That's me, and it says her name. So I'm very, 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 very proud of her. And just lately, this last year, she told me she came up with a sequel of the book, the second version of the novel. So for me, that was a success story of pharmacogenetic that helps me go through and still advocate pharmacogenetics to many of my patients. For insurance, Medicare covers it. I've seen when I first practiced in 2014, it's about 3 grand over the packet, and slowly over time, Medicare covers it. It went down from 3 grand to 1,000 to 500 to 300. Now I've seen most insurance covers it, and if you get it out of a packet, sometimes socialized based on your income, they may even get you only for $75 for pharmacogenetics. I hope you learned something out from it. You get inspired to create some innovative practice in your practice when you become a licensed nurse practitioner, and perhaps incorporate some innovative way to help our patient. Not only considering how medication works, although it's very important, but also considering the uniqueness of each individual in a personalized medicine approach. Thank you.